here's a story from The World.
Along the coast of Argentina in the South Atlantic, the country's territorial waters stretch out for 200 nautical miles. Then at mile 201, it becomes international waters outside of Argentina's jurisdiction. Argentina's Coast Guard can watch what happens there, but not much more than that. For example, when they see large commercial shipping fleets descend on the area to vacuum up as much squid as possible, they cannot take action. Ian Urbina is the founder of an investigative nonprofit called the Outlaw Ocean Project. He said the biggest concern in this region is overfishing.
In any given year, you're looking at 300 to 400 industrial scale fishing vessels. About 75% of those are Chinese and sometimes stay at sea for about 2 years. So it's a huge concentration of very large ships. And they linger, as you said, just across the line. Some of them turn off their transponders and go dark and come into Argentinian waters, which is a separate concern. But just the sheer scale of them across the line has real worries for whether they're taking too much and the stock is going to eventually collapse.
And why squid? Why and where is it in such high demand?
Well, calamari is a worldwide popular appetizer, and so there's an always growing demand for it. And China is the superpower of seafood. They consume and produce and export more than anywhere else in the world. And these waters, the specific regions often called the blue hole, are extremely rich just for reasons of science and the nature of the flows that go through there. It's a really rich squid fishing zone. So in a given year, the Chinese fleet will sort of hug the coast of South America and come down. They'll arrive around Peru on the western side of South America, and they'll come all the way down the coast of Chile, come around the corner and up the side of between the Falkland Islands and Argentina. And the blue hole is right there, and that's where they'll linger longest.
So the South Atlantic obviously is very far from China, but there is this Chinese distant water fleet. Tell us more about that and who operates it.
These are typically huge vessels. About half of them are at least partially state-owned, if not fully state-owned, the ones that come from China. China has the biggest distant water fishing fleet in the world. The next three largest countries' fleets combined don't top China's number. We're talking about maybe 6,500 to 7,000 ships globally. The squid fleet is the biggest portion of China's distant water fleet. They're big industrial vessels. They tend to travel as a group, usually anywhere from 50 to 200 together. Sometimes those fleets have a medical vessel with the fleet that sort of takes care of health emergencies on board of any of the vessels. Sometimes they also have security vessels that travel with the fleet. The catch that they pull on board tends to be quickly frozen. It's mildly processed, frozen. And then every month or so, a refrigeration vessel, often called a reefer vessel, a big ship comes and picks up the catch and takes it back to China so that the fishing vessels can keep working.
So the catch is taken back to China and then sold around the world?
Yeah, it's typically processed in China as cheap labor and huge infrastructure and low labor and environmental regs. And then it's exported to everywhere, including in our investigation, cafeterias and in Congress and public schools and prisons and military bases. This catch is consumed by everyone, including in the U.S.
So I gather that not even 10 years ago, the Chinese government said it would stop expanding its distant water fleet. So what's going on?
China, the environmental concerns, whether they're fishing the world's oceans too intensely, that is one front where the Chinese government actually has pushed advances, and they're tightening the regulations on environmental controls, especially as regards their own waters. When it comes to intensely overfishing the high seas, not as much. So while they may have fewer ships, the hours that the ships are working and the efficiency of the work they're doing, in other words, how much catch they're pulling out of the water, hasn't gone down. On the labor rights concerns that exist on these ships, there's very little progress and things are as bad as they've ever been.
So what does this mean further down the food chain for other species that are part of this whole ecosystem in this mile 201?
So think of two categories, food and climate, right? So if you think of the food pyramid in the water, you've got species eating other species, eating other species. And if you eliminate a huge portion of that triangle, then you have knock-on effects above and below. And so overfishing squid is really consequential because a lot of other species, whales and tuna and other key predator species, rely on squid as their main diet, right? So that's one
Mm.
big concern of overfishing. The other concern is climate, right? So the 80% of the oxygen we breathe is cleansed by the ocean. And it's not the water that does it, it's the marine life there. If you collapse the world's oceans, you are going to have a huge climate impact because the temperature stabilizing and the cleaning function and the carbon capture that all this marine life is doing goes away. So
Wow.
both of those things are big concerns that tie all the way down to squid.
What has been Argentina's response to all of this?
Well, I mean, one, they're constantly eager to show their own population, that they are doing something about it because, the issue of foreign encroachment is a politically sensitive one and it sways elections and it makes for good media at home and it's constantly getting leveraged by this political party against that political party. So the government in power is always eager to show, hey, we know and we're doing something about it. Internationally, the Argentinians are also trying to constantly get support from other neighbors. And the last thing is like regulations, the regulations that exist on these kinds of waters and these kinds of ships and what are the consequences when an incursion happens only tend to work when nations cooperate and they all sort of agree they're all going to impose rules. That kind of cooperation hasn't existed between these countries. So when Uruguay or Peru imposes stricter rules, as they did several years ago on the Chinese fleet switches their location, in this case to Argentina, and more of them start going there because the rules are much laxer and the consequences are much lighter. And so that's like a problem that the Argentinians are having to deal with is how to strengthen their regs.
So if Argentina can't actually take any action to restrict fishing in this area, what recourse does it ultimately have?
That's right. Not a whole heck of a lot. This is a huge global problem of how to police and regulate and govern a non-governing space, outer space, the poles, the high seas. These are all global commons, they're often called. These are places where no single government has authority. So governments have to work together, which is not a popular thing right now, to come up with some sort of alternate mechanisms to try to protect those spaces and share the resources. And that's effort that's not doing very well these days.
Ian Urbina is with the Outlaw Ocean Project. He spoke with us from Washington.